"Dad, can she eat with us?" Nolan Pierce looked up from his phone. Across the table, his 9-year-old son, Caleb, wasn't looking at him. He was watching a woman near the front window of the restaurant. Outside, cold October rain streaked the glass and blurred the headlights moving along the Madison street. Nolan had brought Caleb here after parent-teacher conferences because cooking at 8:30 on a Friday night sounded like punishment for both of them. He still had 6 inspection reports to finish before Monday, and his supervisor had texted 20 minutes earlier asking whether he could cover a Saturday morning property inspection. Nolan had already typed yes. Stability required saying yes more often than he wanted. Before we see what Nolan does, tell me, how old are you? Where are you watching from? And have you ever been caught in a moment where helping someone wasn't as simple as it looked? Who? Nolan asked. Caleb nodded toward the window. The woman looked to be in her 30s. White, fair-skinned, with chestnut brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail. A faded burgundy cardigan covered what looked like a bakery uniform, and there was still a pale streak of flour near one sleeve. She wasn't asking anyone for money. She wasn't making a scene. That was probably why Nolan hadn't noticed her. A waitress stood beside her table holding a small notepad. "So just the coffee?" the waitress asked quietly. The woman glanced at the rain. "Yeah. Could you cancel the sandwich?" "I'm sorry." "No problem. I can pay for the coffee." "I know." The waitress collected the untouched silverware and walked away. Nolan turned back toward Caleb. "She's okay." Caleb frowned. "She doesn't have food." "You don't know why." "Neither do you." Nolan gave him the look reserved for moments when his son was technically correct and enjoying it. Their own table held a burger, grilled cheese, fries, onion rings, and half a basket of rolls Caleb had insisted he was starving enough to finish. He had finished approximately nothing. Nolan looked at the woman again. She checked her phone. 2% battery flashed across the screen before it went dark. Then she pulled a folded bus schedule from her tote bag. Nolan recognized the problem before Caleb did. He inspected residential properties across Madison for a living. Knowing neighborhoods, streets, and transit routes came with the job. The route printed on that schedule had been suspended earlier because of flooding near the underpass. Still, he hesitated. Nolan had rules about strangers. Not cruel rules. Practical ones. Since his wife died 3 years earlier, every decision passed through the same filter. Does this make Caleb's life safer or more complicated? He could buy the woman dinner. Then what? Would she feel embarrassed? Would Caleb think every stranger's problem belonged to them? Would Nolan turn a quiet act into something that made him feel generous and her feel small? The waitress returned with the check. The woman paid cash, slipped her dead phone into her tote, and stood. She pulled on a thin raincoat that looked completely wrong for the weather. Caleb looked at his father. "Dad." Nolan exhaled. "I heard you." The woman reached the front door. Cold wind pushed inside when another customer entered, carrying a spray of rain across the tile. Nolan looked at the unfinished food on their table, then at his son, then at the woman reaching for the door. He stood, not dramatically. Nobody stopped talking. Nobody in the restaurant even noticed. Nolan caught up with her beneath the awning outside. "Excuse me." She turned immediately, guarded. Up close, she looked exhausted more than hungry. Nolan shoved his hands into the pockets of his navy work jacket. "My son ordered enough fries to feed a hockey team." Through the window, Caleb stared at him. The woman glanced inside, then back at Nolan. He did. "No, but I'm trying to preserve his dignity." For the first time, her expression softened. Nolan nodded toward their table. "You're welcome to help us finish them. No strings attached." Her eyes narrowed slightly at those last 3 words. Nolan didn't know why. For several seconds, rain hammered the metal awning between them. Then she looked through the glass at Caleb. Caleb lifted one fry like a tiny invitation. The woman almost smiled. "Almost. My name's Tessa," she said. "Nolan." She looked. At the door, then at the rain beyond the awning. Finally, she made the choice herself. Tessa turned around and walked back inside. By the time Tessa sat down, Caleb had already pushed the basket of fries toward the empty place beside him. "You can have the crispy ones," he said. "Dad likes the floppy ones." Nolan stared at his son. "I have never said that." "You eat them. That is not the same thing." Tessa laughed quietly as she slipped off her damp raincoat. Some of the tension left her shoulders. "I'll take the crispy ones, then." For the next 20 minutes, Nolan worked hard not to turn dinner into an interview. Caleb made that easy. He explained his fourth-grade science project, complained about a classmate who believed every volcano needed actual fire, and asked Tessa whether working in a bakery meant she could eat cookies whenever she wanted. "It means I'm tired of cookies before most people wake up," she said. "What time do you start?" 5. Caleb looked horrified. "That's still nighttime." "Exactly." Nolan smiled, but he noticed Tessa checking the dark screen of her phone. "You need a charger?" "I'm okay. I've got one in the truck." I said I'm okay. The answer came sharper than the question deserved. Tessa caught herself. "Sorry. Long day." Nolan nodded. "No problem." When the waitress brought the check, Tessa immediately reached into her tote. Nolan put a hand over the bill. "Dinner was our invitation. I can pay for mine. You canceled your sandwich. And then I ate half your fries. Caleb abandoned those 15 minutes ago. I was saving them." "No, you weren't," Nolan said. Caleb sighed. "I really wasn't." Tessa studied Nolan for a moment before putting her wallet away. "Thank you," she said. Nothing dramatic happened. No one applauded. They were simply three people finishing dinner while rain rattled against the windows. Then Tessa tried to leave. She borrowed a charger from the hostess long enough to restart her phone. The first thing she checked was the transit app. Her expression changed. "What?" "Nothing." Nolan knew that word. Adults used it when something was definitely something. Tessa zoomed in on the route map. The number 7 isn't running past Park Street. "Flooding near the underpass," Nolan said. "They shut it down around 7. She looked at him. "You memorize bus closures?" "Building inspector. I spend most of my life driving around Madison and being disappointed by drainage." Tessa checked another route. The motel where she was staying was nearly 4 miles away. "I'll get a rideshare." I can call one." Her phone dropped to 1%. Nolan wisely said nothing. 10 minutes later, 2 drivers had canceled. The rain had turned heavier, pushed sideways by a hard north wind. Nolan looked at Caleb, who was yawning into his jacket. His original plan had been simple: restaurant, home, get Caleb into bed, finish 2 inspection reports, maybe sleep before Saturday's overtime. Instead, he heard himself say, "We can drive you." Tessa immediately shook her head. "It's out of your way. About 12 minutes. You know where I'm staying? You showed me the route." That sounded less creepy in your head, didn't it? Much less. That earned another small smile. 25 minutes later, Nolan pulled his aging gray Subaru beneath the motel awning. Caleb had fallen asleep in the back seat. Tessa gathered her tote and raincoat. "Thank you for the ride." "Sure." "And dinner?" "Sure." She opened the door, then stopped. From her wallet, she pulled out a 10 and 2 5s and placed them in the cup holder. Nolan frowned. "What's that?" "My dinner." "I told you. I know what you told me." "Tessa, keep it." Her expression hardened. "Then it wasn't dinner." Nolan paused. "It was charity." "That's not what I meant." "Maybe not. But if you get to decide I can't pay you back, then you're deciding what this was for both of us." Nolan looked at the money. Every instinct told him to hand it back. Taking $20 from someone staying at a roadside motel felt wrong. But something in Tessa's face told him refusing would be less generous than accepting. So Nolan picked up the cash. "Okay." Tessa seemed surprised. "Okay. You paid for dinner." A little tension disappeared from her jaw. "Good night, Nolan." "Good night." She stepped into the rain and hurried toward her room. Nolan watched until the door closed. From the back seat came Caleb's sleepy voice. "Did she pay us?" Nolan started the engine. "Yeah." "Why?" He looked at the $20 in his hand. "Because she wanted to." Caleb considered that, already half asleep. Then Nolan slipped the money into his wallet instead of returning it. For once, helping someone had meant accepting the boundary they gave him. 4 days later, Nolan walked into Maple and Grain Bakery carrying a note from Caleb's teacher that said, in aggressive yellow highlighter, 2 dozen muffins. And oh nuts. He had forgotten about it until breakfast. That was how Nolan found Tessa again. She stood behind the counter in a dark green apron over a cream thermal shirt, arranging blueberry muffins beneath the glass display. Her chestnut hair was tied back, and the exhaustion Nolan remembered from Friday night was mostly gone. Tessa recognized him immediately. "Floppy fries." Nolan stopped. "That nickname cannot become permanent." "No promises." He ordered 24 muffins. While Tessa boxed them, Nolan noticed a set of car keys beside the register with a repair shop tag attached. "Car trouble." She followed his eyes. "My Honda needs an alternator." and apparently several other things the mechanic described using expensive words. How are you getting to work? Walking. Nolan glanced outside. The morning temperature hovered around 38 degrees. From the motel? Tessa paused. He immediately regretted asking. Yes. That's almost 2 miles. I'm aware. I walk all of them. Nolan smiled slightly. I inspect an apartment complex 3 blocks from here every morning this week. That sounds suspiciously convenient. It's annoyingly convenient. She slid the muffin boxes toward him. I'm fine, Nolan. There it was again. The boundary. He nodded and paid. Then Caleb ruined everything that afternoon. Nolan was picking him up from school when Caleb spotted Tessa walking along East Washington Avenue, carrying groceries beneath a gray wool coat. Isn't that Tessa? Yes. Why don't we drive her? She said she's fine. Caleb considered this. Okay. No wisdom. No guilt trip. Just okay. For some reason. That made Nolan reconsider more than an argument would have. He pulled over anyway. Tessa stared through the passenger window when it lowered. I believe we discussed this. I'm not rescuing you. We're going the same direction. You don't know where I'm going. Nolan pointed toward the grocery bags. Fair. Caleb leaned forward from the back seat. We have heat. Tessa laughed. 3 minutes later, she climbed in. By Friday, an accidental ride had become 3 mornings. Exactly 3, Tessa insisted. At 6:10 each morning, Nolan stopped outside the motel. She climbed into the Subaru carrying coffee, usually wearing her gray coat over bakery clothes. They talked about ordinary things, weather, bad drivers, Caleb's science project, Nolan's talent for finding code violations in newly renovated bathrooms. On the 3rd morning, Tessa mentioned she had an interview with a transitional housing program. Nolan's mind immediately switched into inspection mode. What building? Why? I know most of the properties around here. Some are better managed than others. It's just an interview. I could give you a list of places. Actually, I know a landlord on the west side with a studio opening next month. Tessa looked out the window. Nolan kept going. Older building, but solid. Heat included. I inspected it last spring. I could call him. Nolan. And if the deposit is the issue, there are programs. Nolan. He finally looked at her. I appreciate the rides. Something about her tone made him straighten. But I told you I have an interview. I didn't ask you to find me an apartment. I'm just giving you options. I already have options. He gripped the steering wheel. Okay. The rest of the drive passed quietly. At the bakery, Tessa opened the door. Thank you for the ride. Sure. She stepped out, then leaned back inside. And please don't call that landlord. I won't. She shut the door. Nolan watched her disappear into the bakery. He meant what he had said. He wouldn't call. But driving toward his first inspection, he caught himself thinking about the studio anyway. Its rent, its bus access, its clean inspection history. Nolan had spent his career seeing problems and fixing them before they became dangerous. He was good at it. What he hadn't realized yet was that people weren't buildings. And being able to see a solution didn't automatically give him permission to choose it for someone else. For 2 days, Nolan kept his promise. He didn't call the landlord. He didn't send Tessa apartment listings. He didn't even drive past the building on purpose, although he caught himself thinking about it every time he crossed the west side of Madison. Then Tuesday afternoon, his job put him there anyway. Nolan was finishing an exterior inspection when Martin Keene, the building's 62-year-old owner, came down the front steps carrying a clipboard. Pierce, you still looking for a place for that friend? Nolan froze. A week earlier, before Tessa had specifically told him not to interfere, Nolan had casually mentioned that someone he knew might need an affordable studio. He should have ended the conversation right there. Instead, he asked, you still have one? 3rd floor. December 1st. 900, heat included. That was cheaper than Nolan expected. Martin flipped through his papers. If she's working, I can probably move fast. Nolan knew exactly what he should say. Thanks, but forget I mentioned it. Instead, he pictured Tessa walking nearly 2 miles before sunrise in 30-degree weather. He pictured the motel, the broken Honda, the transitional housing interview that might lead nowhere. What about credit requirements? Standard. Unless she has a co-signer. Nolan hesitated. I might be able to help with that. The words were out before he examined what they meant. That evening, he texted Tessa. Found something that might be worth seeing. Affordable studio. Heat included. Good building. Her reply came 5 minutes later. I asked you not to do that. Nolan stared at the screen. I didn't commit you to anything. I just heard about an opening. Another pause. Then, can we talk tomorrow? They met outside the bakery after Tessa's shift. November had arrived with a sharp wind that stripped the last yellow leaves from the trees. Tessa wore her gray wool coat, a knitted burgundy scarf, jeans, and worn brown boots. Nolan had come straight from work in his navy insulated jacket. I didn't call him after you told me not to, Nolan said immediately. Tessa folded her arms. You called him before? I mentioned you might be looking. You mentioned me? Not your name. That's not the point. Nolan felt irritation rising. I found an affordable apartment in a decent building. I know the inspection history. I know the owner. Most people would consider that useful. I'm sure they would. And the only complication is the cosigner requirement. Tessa's expression changed. Nolan knew immediately he had made things worse. You asked about cosigning? I asked what the requirements were. And Nolan exhaled. I told him I might be able to help. Tessa stared at him. You barely know me. I wasn't promising anything. You were discussing becoming financially responsible for an apartment I never asked you to find. When you say it like that, how else should I say it? Nolan looked away. Cars moved through the intersection behind them, tires whispering over wet pavement. You said you needed a place. I said I was finding one. I'm trying to make things easier. For who? The question stopped him. Tessa's voice softened, but not much. You see a problem, Nolan, and 5 seconds later you're building a solution around somebody. That's literally part of my job. I'm not one of your buildings. He remembered thinking almost those exact words days earlier. Apparently understanding something privately and living by it were different skills. I'm not trying to control you. I know. That answer surprised him. Tessa looked tired rather than angry now. That's what makes this complicated. I know you mean well. Then why are we fighting? Because good intentions don't automatically make every decision yours to make. Nolan shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. So what am I supposed to do? Watch you struggle when I know something that could help. You can tell me something exists. I did. You went further. Silence settled between them. Tessa adjusted the strap of her tote. You were easier to trust when all you offered was a chair. That one landed. She started walking toward the bus stop. Tessa. She turned. I'll take the bus from here, she said. And no more rides for a while. Nolan wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded. That night, Caleb sat at the kitchen table painting cardboard planets for his science project while Nolan aggressively chopped onions for dinner. You're mad, Caleb said. I'm chopping. You chop louder when you're mad. Nolan put down the knife. Caleb painted Saturn's ring blue. After a moment, he asked, Did Tessa like the apartment? No. Did she see it? No. Did she ask you to find it? Nolan looked at his son. Caleb kept painting. No, Nolan said. Okay. That was all. But Nolan stood there staring at the cutting board, realizing the uncomfortable part wasn't that Tessa had rejected his help. It was that somewhere between offering her a seat and trying to arrange her future, he had stopped asking what she wanted. The following Thursday, Nolan spent his morning inspecting a 3-story brick building on Madison's east side. The property belonged to a nonprofit housing organization. Nolan had been there twice before, but this time he was checking repairs after a plumbing leak in the second-floor hallway. He was kneeling beside a utility closet when he heard a familiar laugh from downstairs. Nolan stood. Through the open doorway to the community kitchen, he saw Tessa. For a second, he assumed she was there about housing. Then he noticed the apron. Not her bakery apron. A plain blue volunteer apron. Tessa was standing behind a stainless steel counter, packing soup containers into paper bags beside an older woman. Her gray coat hung over a chair, and underneath she wore jeans and a rust-colored sweater. She looked busy. More importantly, she looked completely at home. Nolan considered leaving without saying anything. Then Tessa looked up. Their eyes met. Well, she said, either you're following me, or Madison is much smaller than advertised. Nolan lifted his inspection tablet. Work. Convenient defense. I have documentation. That earned a smile. It was the first easy one she had given him since their argument. Nolan finished his inspection before approaching the kitchen. What are you doing here? Tessa tied another bag shut. Volunteering. I gathered that. The housing center gives transit vouchers to volunteers who qualify. For hours here saves me about $25 in bus fares. Nolan blinked. You've been doing this the whole time? For a few weeks. He looked around the room. On one wall, a bulletin board held apartment listings, employment notices, and information about rental assistance. You applied here? Not for this building. Their housing coordinator helped me apply for an income-based apartment across town. Nolan leaned against the doorway. And the interview you mentioned? Went fine. So you already had a plan. Tessa gave him a look. Yes, Nolan. That was the part you kept missing. He deserved that. The older volunteer carried a tray into the back room, leaving them alone. Nolan lowered his voice. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why the motel? Tessa stopped folding a paper bag. He immediately added, You don't have to answer. For several seconds, she didn't. Then she rested both hands on the counter. My sister has a house in Sun Prairie. Spare bedroom. No rent. Nolan frowned. Then why? He caught himself. Tessa noticed. Good save. Nolan nodded. Continue. She let me stay there after my lease ended. At first, it helped. Then she started wanting access to my bank account because she thought I was bad with money. She wanted to know when my shifts started, when they ended, who I was with. Tessa folded the bag slowly. She called my manager twice when I didn't answer my phone. Nolan's expression tightened. She said she was helping. The words landed harder than Tessa intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. I left. For a motel. For a door with a lock that belonged to me. Nolan said nothing. I could go back tomorrow, Tessa continued. She'd pick me up. She'd probably pay to fix my car. She'd tell everyone she saved me. And then my life would belong to her again. The room suddenly felt quieter. Nolan thought about the apartment he had tried to arrange. The landlord. The cosigner. Every solution he had assembled without being asked. He had imagined Tessa, standing still while problems happened around her. But she hadn't been standing still at all. She was working before sunrise, walking when her car failed, trading volunteer hours for transportation, filling out applications, choosing inconvenience over surrendering control of her own life. She wasn't waiting for someone to rescue her. She was already moving. Nolan had simply mistaken struggle for helplessness. I owe you an apology, he said. Tessa studied him. I'm listening. I thought because I could make something easier, I should. That sounds very inspector of you. It sounds worse when you say it. It should. Nolan almost smiled. I won't call landlords. I won't investigate apartments. I won't offer to co-sign anything. Tessa raised an eyebrow. That's a surprisingly specific apology. I had material to work with. She laughed softly. Nolan glanced at the bags lined across the counter. Need help with those? Tessa looked at him. For once, Nolan waited. She pointed toward a stack of empty paper bags. You can open those. That's it. That's what I need. Nolan set down his tablet and started opening bags. No bigger solution. No plan. No rescue. Just the thing she had actually asked him to do. And for the first time since that rainy night in the restaurant, Nolan began to understand that respecting someone's independence didn't mean walking away. Sometimes it meant staying close enough to help and disciplined enough not to take over. 5 days after Nolan's inspection at the housing center, his phone rang while he was packing Caleb's lunch. It was 6:42 on a Thursday morning. Tessa. Nolan stared at her name long enough for Caleb to notice. You gonna answer that? Working on it. He picked up. Morning. Hey. Tessa sounded uncomfortable. I need to ask you something. Nolan almost said, What happened? Instead, he waited. My housing application made it through the first review, she said. They need me at an in-person verification appointment Tuesday at 4:30. That's good. It is. Except my shift ends at 3:45, and the bus gets me there around 5:10. Nolan leaned against the kitchen counter. Tessa continued quickly. I asked to leave early. My manager can't do it because we have a catering order that afternoon. Okay. A pause. Then she said it. Could you give me a ride? Nolan smiled before he could stop himself. Yeah. Just the ride. The old Nolan might have been offended. This Nolan understood. Just the ride. Tessa exhaled. Thank you. What time should I pick you up? 3:50. I'll be there. Nolan ended the call and reached for Caleb's lunch bag. Then he saw the bright orange paper held to the refrigerator by a Wisconsin Badgers magnet. Science Showcase, Tuesday. Students set up for PM presentations. 5:15 p.m. Nolan stopped moving. Caleb followed his eyes. Oh. Nolan closed them. For 3 weeks, Caleb had been building a model showing how different roof angles handled rainwater. Nolan had cut the wooden base. Caleb had painted the houses and tested them in the bathtub until water soaked 2 towels and part of the hallway. Nolan had promised he would be there for setup, not just the presentation. All of it. He called Tessa back. She answered immediately. Everything okay? I forgot something. When he explained, she didn't hesitate. Forget the ride. No, Nolan. I said I'd take you. And you told your son you'd be there. I can figure something out. You don't need to. There was no anger in her voice. That somehow made it harder. I'll ask someone at work, Tessa said. Or check another bus. Let me look at the timing first. You're doing the thing again. Nolan almost laughed. No. The thing would be me calling your housing coordinator, your manager, 3 landlords, and possibly the governor. That does sound like you. I'm not promising anything yet. I'm checking what I can actually do. Tessa went quiet. That distinction mattered. All right, she said. Check. That evening, Nolan sat at the dining table with a city map open on his laptop. Bakery to housing office, 23 minutes without traffic. Housing office to Caleb's school, 31. Too tight. He tried alternate routes. Still tight. Caleb worked beside him, attaching labels to his science display. You can take her, Caleb said. Nolan shook his head. This isn't your problem to solve. But I made you a promise. That matters too. Caleb nodded and went back to his project. Nolan looked at the routes again. For years, he had treated responsibility like a checklist. Find the problem. Fix it. Move on. But this wasn't about choosing which person mattered more. Tessa mattered. Caleb mattered. And Nolan's word mattered to both of them. For once, he refused to make a heroic promise he couldn't guarantee. He texted Tessa. I'm still working on it. I'll tell you tomorrow what I can actually commit to. Her reply came a minute later. That works. Nolan set down the phone. It wasn't a solution, but it was honest. And lately, he was learning that honest limits could be a form of kindness too. The solution came from Tessa before Nolan could invent one. Friday afternoon, she called while he was sitting in the school pickup line. I found a ride for Tuesday, she said. Nolan felt relief first, then something strangely close to disappointment. That's great. My coworker Denise gets off at 3:30. She said she can take me. Perfect. So you're officially released from transportation duty. I'll notify management. Tessa laughed. Then her voice changed. There's one problem. Nolan waited. The housing office emailed me this morning. They're missing my employment verification form. My manager says she submitted it 2 weeks ago. Can she send another copy? She did. They still can't find it in their system. Nolan's inspector brain immediately produced 6 possible solutions. He kept all 6 inside his head. What do you want me to do? Silence. Not an uncomfortable silence. A surprised one. Finally, Tessa said, That's new. I'm trying something. I noticed. Nolan smiled. What do you need? I don't know yet. I'm going to call the housing coordinator Monday morning. Okay. If they tell me I need something I can't get, I'll ask. Okay. Another pause. Thanks, Nolan. For doing nothing? For letting me do it. Monday became messy fast. At 10:17, Tessa texted him. Found the problem. Bakery changed payroll companies in September. Housing office has the old employer ID. Nolan read the message between inspections. Can you fix it? Already working on it. That was all. He put the phone away. By Tuesday afternoon, November clouds hung low over Madison, threatening the season's first snow. Nolan stood in Caleb's school gym wearing his navy winter jacket, holding one side of a cardboard display while Caleb taped down a plastic gutter. You're crooked, Caleb said. The house is crooked. You're holding the house. Then I withdraw my defense. Around them, parents carried poster boards and folding displays through the crowded gym. At 4:26, Nolan's phone buzzed. He checked it. Tessa had sent a photo. It showed a stamped employment verification form on the housing office counter. Underneath were 4 words. They accepted it. Finally, Nolan smiled. Caleb looked up. Tessa. Yeah. Did she get the apartment? Don't know yet. Caleb pressed another piece of tape onto the roof. But she fixed the paper thing? She did. Cool. Nolan started typing a reply. That's great. I knew you. He stopped. Deleted it. Then typed. Nice work. Hope the rest goes smoothly. Tessa responded with a thumbs up. 20 minutes later, Nolan's phone rang. This time, he stepped into the hallway. They approved the documents, Tessa said. Excitement pushed through her attempt to sound calm. Final decision should come Friday. That's really good. Yeah. You okay? I think so. She laughed nervously. I'm standing outside the building, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Nolan leaned against the hallway wall. A month earlier, he would have started planning. Moving boxes. transportation, furniture, deposits, everything. Instead, he asked, "What do you want to do?" Tessa was quiet. "Go get coffee," she said finally. "Something warm. It's freezing." "Then go get coffee." "You busy?" Nolan looked through the gym doors. Caleb was standing beside his project, waiting for him. "Yeah," Nolan said. "I am." There was no guilt in saying it. Caleb's showcase starts in 20 minutes. "Then go be his dad." "I intend to." Tessa laughed softly. "Good night, Nolan." "Good night, Tessa." He put the phone away and walked back into the gym. Caleb handed him a plastic cup of water for the roof demonstration. Nolan took it. For once, nobody needed rescuing. Tessa was handling her life. Caleb had his father beside him. And Nolan was beginning to understand that caring about someone didn't require becoming the center of their solution. Friday morning brought the first real snow of the season. Not enough to cover Madison, just a thin white dusting on parked cars and rooftops. Nolan was scraping ice from the Subaru before work when his phone rang. "Tessa, please tell me this is good news," he said. "It's complicated." Nolan stopped scraping. "The housing office approved me." He smiled. "Tessa, that's great." "It is." Mostly. There was something underneath her voice. "What happened?" "They need one final employment document by 5 today. The payroll company sent the verification form, but it doesn't show my average weekly hours." Nolan glanced at his watch. "Can your manager send it?" "She's trying. Corporate HR has to release it." His mind immediately started working. He knew city offices. He knew housing administrators. He could make calls. Then he remembered. "What do you want me to do?" Tessa went quiet. "I have the HR number," she said. "I just could use a ride to the housing office after work. If I get the document, I want to hand it to them myself." Nolan looked at the ice on his windshield. "What time?" 3:50. "I can do that." This time, Caleb's science showcase wasn't waiting at the other end of the afternoon. Nolan could help without breaking another promise. By 4:15, freezing rain had replaced the snow. Tessa sat in the passenger seat wearing her gray wool coat, burgundy scarf, and brown boots, refreshing her email every 30 seconds. Still nothing. "It'll come." "You don't know that." "Fair." They reached the housing office at 4:38. Inside, Tessa approached the front desk, while Nolan stayed several feet behind her. The coordinator checked the application. No updated verification yet. Tessa called the bakery. Her manager had contacted HR twice. For 44, Tessa called payroll. Voicemail. For 48, Nolan felt every instinct in his body telling him to step forward. He knew how bureaucracies worked. He knew how to sound official. His city badge was clipped inside his jacket. He could mention his department. He could ask for a supervisor. He could take control. Instead, he looked at Tessa. "What do you want me to do?" She stared at him, then at the clock. "Can I use your charger?" Nolan almost laughed from relief. "Absolutely." He handed it over. Tessa plugged in her phone and called the bakery again. "Can you give me the HR email address?" She wrote it down. Then she called HR directly. The first person transferred her. The second said the request could take 2 business days. Tessa didn't raise her voice. "I understand your policy," she said. "But the request was submitted Tuesday, and this document determines whether my housing application stays active. Can you please check whether it has already been processed?" Another hold. For 53, Nolan paced once, caught himself, and stopped. Tessa pointed at him. "No inspector face." "I have an inspector face?" "You absolutely do." Even now, she made him smile. The HR representative returned. The document had been processed but sent to the wrong email address. Tessa slowly closed her eyes. "Could you resend it while I'm on the phone?" For 55, nothing. For 56, her phone chimed. Tessa opened the email. There. She forwarded it to the housing coordinator, who printed the page and attached it to the application. "Complete," the coordinator said. That was it. No applause. No dramatic announcement. Just one word. Complete. Outside, freezing rain clicked against the sidewalk. Tessa stood beneath the awning, staring through the glass door. Nolan joined her. "You did it. We don't know if I got the apartment yet." "No, but you did this part." Tessa looked at him. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "A month ago, you would have been behind that counter arguing with somebody." Nolan nodded. "Probably. You would have hated standing there doing nothing." "I wasn't doing nothing." "No. You asked for a ride." A smile slowly appeared on her face. "And a charger. Premium service." She laughed. Nolan unlocked the Subaru. For the first time, helping Tessa hadn't made him feel powerful. It made him feel trusted, and that turned out to be better. 3 weeks later, Tessa had a key of her own. The apartment wasn't glamorous. It was a small third-floor studio with old hardwood floors, one narrow closet, and a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people to stand in without negotiating territory. But when Tessa turned the key for the first time, the door opened to a place where nobody could demand her passwords, monitor her schedule, or decide what was best for her. She had gotten it through the housing program. Nolan hadn't made a phone call. He hadn't co-signed anything. He hadn't paid her deposit. And somehow, he was happier for her because of that. By early December, Madison had settled into winter. Snow lined the curbs, and people hurried through downtown wrapped in heavy coats and knit hats. Tessa's Honda was still at the repair shop. She was still waking before sunrise for bakery shifts. Her apartment contained a mattress, 2 folding chairs, for mismatched plates, and a coffee maker she had bought used. Her life hadn't magically changed. It had simply become hers again. On a Saturday evening, Nolan and Caleb returned to the same restaurant where everything had started. Caleb was wearing a red puffer jacket and talking nonstop about how his science teacher wanted him to enter his roof drainage project in a district competition. Nolan had barely removed his black winter coat when Caleb looked toward the entrance. Tessa. She had just walked in. Her chestnut hair was loose beneath a cream knit hat, and she wore the gray wool coat Nolan recognized over dark jeans and winter boots. Tessa spotted them. For a moment, nobody moved. Nolan remembered the rainy October night, the canceled sandwich, the dead phone, Caleb asking a simple question, and Nolan standing up because he thought kindness meant doing something. Now he understood there was another half to it. Sometimes kindness meant not doing too much. Tessa approached their booth. Caleb looked at the empty seat beside him, then at Nolan. Nolan said nothing. He wasn't going to make the invitation for her. Not this time. Tessa stopped beside the table. Is this seat taken? Caleb grinned. Nope. Tessa slid into the booth. The waitress brought menus. Tessa ordered dinner herself. When the check eventually came, Nolan didn't reach for it. They split it. No argument. Outside, snow began falling beneath the streetlights. Nothing about the evening would have looked extraordinary to anyone passing the window. A father, a son, a woman sharing dinner with them. But the quietness of that picture was exactly what mattered. Tessa no longer sat at their table because someone had noticed she couldn't afford a meal. She sat there because she wanted their company. Nolan no longer saw her as a problem waiting for his solution. He saw her as Tessa, and maybe that is something worth remembering. Money can change what choices a person has, but it does not determine what that person is worth. Being poor does not make someone less intelligent, less responsible, less honorable, or less deserving of respect. Being wealthy does not make someone more human. People carry circumstances we cannot see from across a restaurant. A worn coat does not tell us someone's character. An empty plate does not tell us someone's value. And needing help today does not mean a person will need someone else to run their life tomorrow. Everyone deserves dignity, whether they have a full bank account or $20 left in their wallet. Everyone deserves compassion without humiliation and help without being treated as inferior. Caleb had understood one small part of that before Nolan did. He had seen an empty chair and wondered why someone had to sit alone. But Nolan learned the harder lesson afterward. Respect was not merely standing up for someone. Sometimes respect meant standing beside them without standing over them. Tessa reached across the table and stole one of Caleb's fries. Hey, you weren't eating it. I was saving it. Nolan laughed. Tessa smiled. And outside the window, the snow kept falling while 3 people finished an ordinary dinner together. No rescuer, no charity case, no debt between them. Just people worthy of the same chair at the table.